Welcome to the briefing room. I'm Kenneth Moden inside our Washington bureau for ABC News alongside with my colleague Johnny Vrhovic right here. It's been a big day here in Washington with another big departure from the Trump administration. The U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, has resigned. President Trump making the announcement from the Oval Office with Haley by his side this morning. The big questions: what happened? What's next? Who's next to take over that crucial post? And what does it all mean for the U.S. interests around the world? To help me break it down today, Johnny, along with my colleagues, Catherine Faulders and Ali Rogan on Capitol Hill, because we've got other big news as well with the first day of Brett Kavanaugh on the high court. And we are just 4 weeks away from that all-important November midterm election, just in case you haven't heard. 4 weeks. But first, back to Nikki Haley. Let's get right back to Catherine Faulders at the White House. Catherine, this departure feels a lot different from the others we've seen within the Trump administration, because we saw the president really go out of his way there to praise Nikki Haley and the work she's done.
Yeah, and this led us all, right after we reported that the resignation was going to happen, we were all thinking, why exactly is he calling reporters the White House pool into the Oval Office to make this announcement? This is a first for him. He called her a good friend, and she said she just wanted to take a break from this. But look, she's been a trusted member of his administration. She's been known not to ruffle any feathers. She's been also a fierce supporter of the president's America First agenda, but she also hasn't been shy to be critical or to bring her concerns directly to the president. The most recent thing, Kenneth, that she wrote, an op-ed in the Washington Post in response to that anonymous op-ed in the New York Times, she said it wasn't her, but she also says when she has a dispute with the president, she takes it directly to him. So bottom line is this comes as a big surprise, a huge surprise to folks in the administration and to us. We weren't expecting this at all. The president said he still plans to keep in touch with her and talk to her. But as you mentioned, the big question is who will take this job next?
Catherine, that's a great question, and I know that there are some names floating around there, non-reportable just yet, but I do know that this resignation letter apparently had the date of last week. The president said he knew about this for some time, even though everyone else says they're surprised by this.
Yeah, the president says he's known about this for some time. It looked like a coordinated thing. He said that she came to him and said that she just wanted to take some time off. But what's interesting about this, though, is he was asked specifically when he would name a replacement. He doesn't know, at least what he's told us. He doesn't know who he's going to name yet. So that speculation is still there. Though, Kenneth, he says that we should have a decision in the next 2 to 3 weeks from him.
And Catherine, let's actually hear from the president right now. Let's take a listen to what he said about Nikki Haley.
I wanted to do this because Nikki Haley, ambassador to the United Nations, has been very special to me. She's done an incredible job. She's a fantastic person, very importantly, but she also is somebody that gets it. She has been at the United Nations from the beginning with us, right from the beginning, and worked with us on the campaign. It's been really a long time, very intense. And she told me probably 6 months ago, she said, you know, maybe at the end of the year, at the end of a 2-year period, but at the end of the year, I want to take a little time off. I want to take a little break. So, Nikki, I just wanted to tell you that we will miss you. We'll be speaking all the time, but we will miss you nevertheless, and you have done a fantastic job, and I want to thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
The president saying Nikki Haley wants to take some time off there. Johnny, let me bring you into this conversation because she served for 8 years. I think she's had a total of 14 years, but 8 years straight with 6 years as governor of South Carolina. I mean, a lot of firsts for this governor as well, and former governor.
Yeah.
First
female governor of South Carolina.
Right.
Second Indian American governor. First female Indian governor in the United States. Definitely a very significant sort of political figure in this day and age. She was often speculated about as a potential vice presidential candidate for the last couple cycles. And she's someone that, you know, and you heard her ask there today if she's running for anything in 2020, and she kind of demurred and she said, no, I'm not running for any office. But I think it's pretty clear that's not because of a lack of desire maybe to one day run for political office. But in 2020, the only seat that's up in South Carolina is Lindsey Graham's Senate seat. There's a governor's race in the state this year. So she's definitely still someone who could reemerge onto the political scene, but it will definitely be interesting to see what she does after this job.
Right, and we should mention again, from South Carolina.
Yep.
And I think it's interesting to point out as well that she did not endorse the president originally. It was Marco Rubio
She did not, yeah.
who she supported.
She was originally a backer of Marco Rubio during the 2016 campaigned for Marco Rubio and kind of gave a tepid endorsement of Donald Trump towards the end of the campaign, right, but was by no means kind of an original supporter of the president's campaign.
Nikki Haley, also known as a tough talker,
yep,
which is most likely why the president really likes her and
yep,
really called the media into the Oval Office to hear from both he and from Nikki Haley as he praised her. No doubt the president likes her again, but I also want to bring attention to something that she's known for, a little bit of a famous statement or a back and forth that she had with Larry Kudlow. Remember this a few months ago when there was some talk about new sanctions against Russia, and the then new economic advisor Larry Kudlow said when Nikki Haley announced that the new sanctions were going to be coming the next day, Kudlow said, I think she may be confused.
Right.
And she famously said, with all due respect, I don't get confused. And
right,
that soundbite really made the rounds.
I think that probably spoke directly to someone like President Trump, who likes direct, tough talkers. And I think that's why you saw Nikki Haley grow from someone who was kind of a former Trump foe to someone who the president really seemed to trust and like a lot.
That 2024 speculation at this point,
yep,
that will be interesting, especially
too soon,
if it's too soon. I can't talk about it. We still have the midterms.
Let's get to 2018. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to handle the midterms, then 2020, and then somewhere down the road we will talk about 2024. All right, so all of this is coming. This big departure is coming as the High Court has a new addition. Brett Kavanaugh had his first day on the Supreme Court, but last night it was somewhat of a celebration, very ceremonial swearing in for Brett Kavanaugh, who was already sworn in over the weekend. I want you to take a listen at what the president had to say about Brett Kavanaugh at that ceremonial swearing in. Take a listen.
On behalf of our nation, I want to apologize to Brett and the entire Kavanaugh family for the terrible pain and suffering you have been forced to endure. Those who step forward to serve our country deserve a fair and dignified evaluation, not a campaign of political and personal destruction based on lies and deception. What happened to the Kavanaugh family violates every notion of fairness, decency, and due process. Our country, a man or a woman, must always be presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. And with that, I must state that you, sir, under historic scrutiny, were proven innocent. Thank you.
But we know that Brett Kavanaugh was not proven innocent after those sex assault allegations he denied, but the president making an incorrect statement there. And Brett Kavanaugh was not proven innocent after a very contentious confirmation fight for that seat. I will say, Catherine, that was an incredible moment and an apology by the president.
An incredible moment and a dramatic entrance by the two of them for that ceremonial swearing in. Remember, this was all really just for show. Brett Kavanaugh had already been sworn in over the weekend, just hours after the Senate confirmed him to the Supreme Court. So it was obviously to deliver that message from the president. And look, Brett Kavanaugh, he also spoke and he thanked the Republican senators in Congress, and he also spoke directly to women, which was a remarkable moment, to which he said women still face many barriers in the American workplace, and all of us have a responsibility to address that problem. He also made sure to say that all of his clerks on the Supreme Court were women as well. So a victory lap for the president last night, and an announcement really fit for primetime television.
You're right about that, Catherine. Let's talk about Brett Kavanaugh's first day on the High Court. The Supreme Court now has 9 again. Let's get over to Allie Rogan on Capitol Hill. Allie, take us inside that courtroom today. I understand Brett Kavanaugh's family was there.
Yeah, well, Kenneth, the difference between the tone inside the Supreme Court today and just Saturday, 3 days ago, when protesters were outside the court screaming and yelling their opposition to this new judge, was incredibly stark. Inside, you had Justice Kavanaugh entering the court smiling. His family, as you mentioned, was in the visitors' row, along with former Justice Kennedy, whom Kavanaugh was replacing. He's sitting at the very end of the line of 9 justices, as per the rules that are dictated by seniority. And a couple interesting things I found out today is that as the most junior member of the Supreme Court, Judge Kavanaugh is now in charge of taking notes in all of the private meetings that the Supreme Court has together. He also has the responsibility to answer the door in those meetings anytime anybody knocks. And my favorite, perhaps, anecdote is that as, again, the new kid on the Supreme Court, he now sits on the committee that deals with the Supreme Court cafeteria, which is open to the public. So as Johnny was saying before the segment, possibly the most polite form of hazing taking place in the Supreme Court, Kenneth.
Some hazing indeed. I understand he has to go get their clothes from the cleaners
I want
as
to see
well.
that menu at the Supreme Court cafeteria.
You know what,
I
I think I've seen it before, and it's a good one.
Yeah.
They eat pretty good over there.
I can see that.
They're doing some important issues, so they need to eat well, right? Johnny, the first case it was one about a question involving violence against women.
Violence against a woman, which you know, if you take that in the context of just the uproar that resulted during Kavanaugh's confirmation fight. But yeah, no, there's some great color that our colleague Terry Moran had, who was in the court this morning, talking about how Kavanaugh was not shy about asking questions. He asked the questions about 15 minutes into oral arguments about this case, which was about what qualifies as a violent crime or a violent felony. And you can see that, yeah, it sounds like Kavanaugh is sort of eager to get on the court and ask those questions. But Allie makes a really important point about the kind of tone that's set when a new justice comes in. The Supreme Court is an American institution that's just steeped in tradition. And I think, it was definitely a very contentious, fight that people are still really kind of angry about. But the Supreme Court is one of those institutions, and you saw Kavanaugh talk about it last night, that really is steeped in tradition, and I think he probably wants to keep that going.
As our Terry Moran pointed out to all of his colleagues here at ABC News after he's covered the court for so many years, decorum really ruled, because Allie mentioned no protests, and you mentioned some of the things about tradition. No iPads like he used during his time as a federal district court judge.
Only pen and paper.
Only pen and pad, and that's it. As far as what's next for a lot of people talking about what's next, what are the big cases that are coming up that this judge could have that the person who really swings the court, which we've already seen that conservative shift. So
absolutely, yeah. And Kavanaugh's confirmation definitely kind of cements that rightward shift of the Supreme Court that's been happening for a while after Justice Kennedy's retirement. But you're right, there are some incredibly consequential cases that are going to be on the Supreme Court's docket this term, from issues related to the environment, from issues related to healthcare, and then you have this whole specter still of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation, and whether there could be issues regarding that find their way to the Supreme Court. The Democrats in the Senate made a huge issue out of Kavanaugh's attitude towards executive privilege and whether or not presidents can be investigated. If that issue comes before the Supreme Court, you're going to see some very sort of interesting arguments ahead.
And we know what happened to fill the Supreme Court seat is being used by both sides in the fast approaching November midterm election. It's going to play a role.
It absolutely is going to play a role, and you've already seen it. You've seen both Republicans and Democrats use the Kavanaugh fight to try and fire up their bases. You see, prominent Democrats out there using it as a way to fire up the base just 4 weeks until the midterms. And then you had Leader McConnell yesterday and Speaker Ryan saying this issue is something that fires up the Republican base. And I think, truth be told, no one really knows the true political effect of this yet. But it's interesting because you could see it playing out very differently in some Senate races where Democrats are up in red states versus House races where there's a lot of sort of suburban seats where you could play out very differently.
And the president definitely has some more rallies. He's got a busy week ahead. Catherine Faldo's back at the White House. The president is really getting ready for that sprint to the November midterm just 4 weeks from today.
Absolutely. He has many rallies. He has one that he's going to actually tonight, and we're getting word that he's actually also talking to reporters on the White House South Lawn right now. This has become a theme for him as he heads to these rallies. But look, he had a great amount last week, and he's, Kenneth, on the road almost every single day this week. He's taking, obviously, victory laps around Kavanaugh, and he says that Kavanaugh's confirmation will actually, obviously, energize his base. You see his supporters there, but in fact, it will also energize Democrats, his prediction, Democrats who he says will vote Republican. So he is doing campaign rally after campaign rally. He's sprinting to the finish line to the midterms in November.
And back to Allie on Capitol Hill. Allie, I have to ask you, when it comes to the schedule for Congress leading up to the November midterm, just 4 weeks again from today, just in case you didn't know, the Senate, they're still going to be in session, but House members, they're going to get more of a break to go back and campaign.
Yeah, that's right, Kenneth. The House is actually out until after the midterms, and the Senate just has a few more lower-level court nominees to pass through. And I think you're going to see Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell adjourn this Senate as soon as possible to allow his Republican members to get out and campaign, and certainly try to take a victory lap on the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh. This is something that is really bolstering the energy of the Republican base, and there are Republicans who are defending Senate seats in more competitive districts than they originally anticipated. So he wants to get folks out of Washington and back on the campaign trail.
There's some strategy, Johnny, to holding the lawmakers here who are, especially in some crucial states where, red state Democrats are vulnerable.
Absolutely. Your Heidi Heitkamps, your Joe Manchins. There's definitely some strategy there. One quick public service announcement I do want to get in. There are a ton of states. There are 18 states in the country today where this is the last day to register to vote. You have some key states, Texas, Florida, Michigan. Today is the last day, so people, if you have time, on your lunch break, after work, do it, do your civic duty.
Great point. We've seen so many people, everyday folks, to politicians, to celebrities, talking about the importance of making your voice heard by voting. Now is your chance. And if you register before today and you just maybe want to check your registration to make sure you're all good, actor LeVar Burton, he did it, and he tweeted this here. Just discovered I have been bounced from the rolls in my home state of California. I registered. Check, register, vote. So the man made famous by Roots, Star Trek, and the Reading Rainbow, giving us one more lesson there to please check your voter registration there. It's interesting that he actually retweeted a tweet from Samantha Power, the former U.S. ambassador to the UN under President Obama. So we're just full circle here at the briefing room.
Rihanna tweeted earlier.
She did.
Point that out.
And then we didn't even have time to get into the whole Taylor Swift
I know.
thing. We'll save that for another briefing room because the Swifties are involved now, so that's a whole other story. One more note, my colleague Devin Dwyer is usually in the spotlight here, but he is getting ready to kick off and premiere a big new show called The Big Vote here on ABC News Live. Again, it's a weekly politics special counting down to the 2018 midterm election. Devin and our political team will take a closer look at the battle to control Congress and what's at stake for you, the issues, the numbers, and the people who are driving this election. The Big Vote again airs today on ABC News digital platforms, including the ABC News app, Roku, and Apple TV. You've been watching The Briefing Room on ABC News Live. For Allie, Johnny, and Catherine, again, our big thanks to our ABC News team. I'm Kenneth Moten. Have a great day.